Deep in occupied Donetsk, Russia's elite Rubicon unit was hard at work. The best of the best when it comes to Russia's unmanned systems forces, Rubicon was developing and utilizing something that it had spent years creating and was irreplaceable to Russia. Now, it has been wiped out. In just one night, Ukraine has taken out a classified base that it wasn't even supposed to know about, and the entire trajectory of the air war in Ukraine has been changed forever. And it's not just the loss of a Rubicon facility that has stung Russia over the last couple of days. Russia's aircraft repairs have also been paralyzed in another deep strike. We'll get to that attack later in the video. First, Rubicon has had a very bad day. On March 18th, the Special Operations Forces of Ukraine, or SSO, took to Telegram to reveal that it had conducted a deep strike in occupied Donetsk that shattered a key Rubicon facility. In Donetsk, long-range SSO drones hit the base of the classified Russian Center of Unmanned Technologies, Rubicon, and the control element of this unit. Also, the coordination center of the enemy's unmanned systems units was hit in the occupied city, the SSO declared, revealing that it had conducted a strike that was tailor-made to neutralize Russia's drone squadrons inside. This was no ordinary base. The fact that it was a classified location shows that Putin was desperately trying to keep the Rubicon facility hidden away from Ukraine. Russia knew this base was irreplaceable, and that doesn't just mean physically. The technology inside has been key to Russia's campaign in Donetsk, but it's the drone experts who have leveraged that technology that Russia absolutely can't afford to lose. Ukraine has not provided any information about casualties, and we're certain not to hear anything from Russia. Putin won't want to reveal anything about yet another Russian loss, as he much prefers the feeling of the sand around his ears as he buries his own head. But make no mistake about it, Ukraine hit Russia so hard on March 18th that the ramifications will be felt throughout Donetsk. How do we know? The SSO didn't just say that it hit the Rubicon facility, Ukraine proved it. A video shared alongside the SSO's statement shows how Ukraine's drones hit their marks on a Russian facility in the occupied territories that should have been guarded by air defenses. Lasting about a minute, the video kicks off with black and white footage being shot from the perspective of a Ukrainian drone as it zeroes in on its target. The drone hits. Then the viewpoint changes to that of another drone as it approaches the now flaming Rubicon facility. The SSO then goes harder as that very drone zooms into the same building the previous drone just hit. This wasn't a single strike. Ukraine hit the Rubicon facility over and over again. Multiple buildings within the complex are targeted, offering a unique insight into the degradation of the Rubicon facility over time. With each strike comes yet more visuals of buildings on fire, as Ukraine struck at the nerve center of Russia's entire Donetsk drone operation. What Ukraine just did is very bad news for Russia. There are several reasons why, starting with what just happened to the unit that Ukraine targeted. We've mentioned that Rubicon is supposed to be the elite when it comes to Russia's drone operators. The unit is certainly notorious enough to have had multiple profiles written about it in mainstream media, one of which was provided by the Kyiv Independent back in December. Deadly, elite, and scaling were the words that the outlet used to describe Rubicon at the time, and it went on to discuss how Rubicon has changed Russia's drone tactics for the worse from Ukraine's perspective. Through Rubicon, Russia has managed to centralize what was once a loose collection of drone operators into a state-backed unit that trains pilots, develops technology, and delivers devastating strikes against Ukraine on the front and in the rear. Rubicon's operators are talented enough to strike Ukraine's logistics and take out its radar systems, and the members of the unit are always on the move. Still, this nomadic drone unit needs some centers of operation, and that's what Ukraine just hit in Donetsk. With the control element of the unit in flames, Rubicon won't be able to launch any more of its drone strikes until it's able to rebuild. The odds are that Ukrainian intelligence will have eyes on the survivors of its March 18th strike and will already be preparing for a follow-up wherever Rubicon sets up next. Better yet for Ukraine, this strike also means that it's relieved the pressure on its own drone units. The Kyiv Independent reports that Rubicon specializes in hunting down Ukraine's drone operators, which is clearly a tactic designed to diminish Ukraine's drone advantage on the front. Rubicon has proven itself effective in that domain. Between February and November 2025, the unit went from publishing 513 strikes against Ukraine to 2,246 per month. Rubicon was a puzzle. Ukraine has just found the solution. By the way, this isn't the only blow that Rubicon has absorbed in 2026. Before we get into what Ukraine's latest strike means for Russia on a wider level, it's worth noting that Rubicon has been dealing with some internal strife of late. On February 16th, United 24 media reported that one of Rubicon's elite drone operators had gotten so sick of working under Putin's thumb that he hadn't just deserted the Russian military, he defected. That operator is now working for Ukraine, and he revealed that he, like many other Russian soldiers, didn't want to fight in Putin's war in the first place. A former real estate professional from Novosibirsk, Miroslav Simonov, had been detained by police during a trip to Moscow over his failure to comply with a compulsory service order. The operator was given a choice: go to the front via formal conscription or sign up to work in a logistics unit that would place him close to his father. With no other options, the soldier chose the latter, and over time he found himself working for Rubicon. Simonov attempted to escape once before. He was caught and sent to the front as an assault soldier. Rather than commit to Putin's suicidal meat assaults, he contacted Ukraine's I Want to Live service and completed a long 10-kilometer or 6.2-mile trek so that he could hand himself over. Finally, the brutality of serving in Rubicon and the wider Russian military was over, and as Simonov was taken into custody, he witnessed something that revealed to him that he had made the right choice. Ukraine captured another Russian soldier with Simonov in tow. That soldier was injured. The Ukrainian fighter who found him carried the injured Russian rather than leaving him behind. That's when I understood the difference between Russia and Ukraine, Simonov said during a video interview. As for his future plans, now to fight, to kill dogs. I do not consider them human. I have very serious grievances against my state. They broke not only my life but the lives of many guys. To defend your home, Simonov says. Rubicon may be Russia's elite drone force, but with its Donetsk command center burning and some of its members defecting to Ukraine, it's clear that nothing is smooth sailing, even in a unit into which Putin has invested enormous amounts of money and manpower. Let's come back to Ukraine's strike. What the SSO has just pulled off shows that Ukraine is changing everything about how it conducts drone-based battles against Russia. What we saw on March 18th was next-level asymmetric warfare, and we'll explain why that changes everything in a moment. But first, this is the military show, and we bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, subscribe to the channel today. Ukraine's latest strike has affected a unit that Euromaidan Press says has 5,000 personnel and massive financial resources. The outlet also reveals that Ukraine's strike was aided by underground members of an anti-Putin resistance movement inside Donetsk, which, along with the defection we just mentioned, indicates that all is not rosy in the occupied territories that Putin has long claimed would welcome Russian occupation. That couldn't be further from the truth, and Russia is now having to deal with its own turning against it, alongside the underground fighters who continue to resist in Donetsk. Russia is also having to deal with Ukraine's middle strike drones, and that's the true game-changer in the asymmetric war that Ukraine has waged against Russia for 4 years. What we see in the strike against Rubicon is Ukraine deploying middle strike drones. These drones are huge for Ukraine. Until recently, Ukraine has focused almost solely on the development of FPV drones and long-range drones that enable strikes deep into Russia itself. Both are extremely important, but neither provides Ukraine with the capability it needs to attack the Russian rear in the occupied territories. FPV drones don't have the range, meaning they're useful across the combat lines and in Ukraine's kill zones, but not beyond. Long-range drones could hit the near rear, but using them to strike occupied territories means that Ukraine can't degrade Putin's war machine inside Russia itself. Ukraine needed other options, as former US Army Green Beret Brian Pickens explained to the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA, in January. Most of what matters now sits in the 30 to 100 kilometer range, Pickens told CEPA, adding, Russia pushes expendable infantry forward while holding its most valuable systems deep and protected by electronic warfare. Ukraine does not have scalable systems that can reliably strike there. Rubicon had those types of drones, now Ukraine has them too, and strikes like the one that it just pulled off in Donetsk show that it's taken its asymmetric strategy to another level. Ukraine can now combine its intelligence, which is already leagues ahead of Russia's, with the weapons it needs to score direct hits against classified facilities in the occupied territories. And it can do it all while expanding the FPV-laden kill zones and continuing its campaign of deep strikes in Russia. Ukraine is now the total package when it comes to drones, and the numbers prove it. On March 19th, the Kyiv Post published an analysis of Ukraine's drone strikes against Russia so far in 2026. The TLDR version is that Ukraine is sending larger swarms and striking more targets than ever before. More details include the fact that Ukraine's drones have carried out 40 major attacks against targets in the mid and long range, stretching from 50 to 250 kilometers or 31 to 155 miles during the first half of March alone. For context, Ukraine's record number of strikes conducted in this range is 57 attacks, which it recorded in December 2025. If Ukraine maintains its current pace, it will have hit 80 major attacks by the end of March, which is more than a 50% increase over the past record. Ukraine's pace of drone attacks has practically doubled, the Kyiv Post adds, and its swarms are getting larger. In the 6 weeks leading up to March 18th, the average swarm that Ukraine sends into Russia in the occupied territories is between 100 and 200 drones. At the end of 2025, it was between 50 and 70. And to top it all off, the first half of March has seen Ukraine hit a rough parity with Russia in terms of the number of middle strike and long-range drones that it's launching. What this tells us is that Ukraine has the right types of drones and that it's producing those drones in high enough quantities to enable it to do things like neutralize Rubicon in Donetsk. Just a few months ago, Russia's most valuable assets were safe as long as they were a few dozen kilometers behind the front lines. Now, they aren't. And Ukraine is making Russia feel the pain by using a new drone strategy that has taken more than a couple of cues from Russia's own drone swarm approach, but has been combined with Ukrainian intelligence to ensure far more valuable military targets are being taken out. That brings us back to something that we mentioned right at the beginning of the video. You remember what that was? We told you that Russia's aircraft repairs have been paralyzed in a separate deep strike. That just goes to show how effective Ukraine's combined middle and long-range approaches have become. Here's what happened. On March 16th, Ukraine's drones traveled to Russia's Ulyanovsk region, which is to the east of Moscow and about 800 kilometers or 500 miles from the border that Russia shares with Ukraine. There, they touched down on the Avistar aircraft manufacturing plant, which is owned by United Aircraft Corporation, which itself falls under the umbrella of Russia's massive Rostec enterprise. Ukraine's drones hit parking areas and aircraft shelters, Euromaidan press reports, but the most important news about this strike is that it took out a plant that is responsible for producing AN-124 heavy cargo aircraft, along with Il-78M-90A tankers and Il-76MD-90A military transport aircraft. In other words, this means Russian cargo, personnel transport, and refueling aircraft were all taken down in one strike. Wait, did we say one? We meant to say two. Just a day later, Ukraine also completed a drone strike against the 123rd Aircraft Repair Plant, which is located in the city of Staraya, in Russia's Novgorod region. This time, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces took to Telegram to reveal the strike, along with sharing a picture demonstrating that Ukraine's long-range drones once again found their marks. The enterprise specializes in the full cycle of repair and modernization of military transport aircraft and their components, which allows it to receive heavy aircraft directly on the territory of the enterprise, the General Staff revealed when sharing its reasoning for the attack. And it added that a hangar used for servicing several types of Russian aircraft, including the previously mentioned Il-76MD-90A and the L-410, which is a light transport aircraft that often serves a utility role in Russian aerial operations. With this pair of strikes, Ukraine proves that it's not losing focus on the deeper campaign inside Russia as it adapts to its new middle strike strategy. Long and mid strikes are taking place at the same time, and Russia is burning because of it. The targets Ukraine chose are key here. Both of the facilities Ukraine hit between March 16th and 17th weakened Russia's air force and, crucially, its ability to support its troops in Ukraine. Taking out the Avistar plant in Ulyanovsk prevents Russia from building any more of its cargo, refueling, and military transport aircraft, at least for as long as it takes for repairs to be completed. Following that up with a strike against a repair plant that specializes in several of these aircraft also means that any support airframes that need maintenance aren't going to be getting off the ground anytime soon. They're stuck in Staraya, essentially paralyzed in place and utterly useless to Russia until that plant is up and running again. If hitting Rubicon in Donetsk was about stripping away Russia's aerial offensive capabilities, this pair of strikes is more about degrading Russian logistics. Without the planes that it can no longer produce or repair, Russia will have a much harder time moving military equipment, cargo, and troops around its own territory. Delays happen, supply chain issues arrive, soldiers and cargo that were meant to be shipped into Ukraine via Russia's train network don't get to go where they need to go in time to make the journey. And what all of this adds up to, as is the case with so many of Ukraine's deep strikes, is weakened Russian assaults on the front, which only lead to more casualties in Putin's ranks. And as the Russian casualty count creeps up to 1.29 million people after a little over 4 years of fighting, the last thing that Putin needs right now is more dead soldiers. He'll send more, but every dead or injured soldier is replaced by somebody who is barely trained and nowhere near ready for the horrors of the war that Putin started. Frankly, the Russian Air Force has had a terrible time in Ukraine. One of the reasons why units like Rubicon have grown to be as large and as important as they are is that Russia has completely failed to make what should be an enormous aerial advantage over Ukraine count. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Russia has lost 435 of its planes and 349 of its helicopters against Ukraine since the war started, which amounts to around $8.5 billion in aerial equipment losses since the start of the invasion. Russia has been reduced to pulling its planes far back from Ukraine, where they're used to launch missiles and glide bombs from a safe distance. But with strikes like the ones that Ukraine just carried out against these two aircraft manufacturing plants, what Russia can consider a safe distance is changing. If Ukraine knows where Russian air power is, it can hit it. Deep strikes are a devastating threat, and Russia just learned that the hard way as two of its aircraft plants burn. It gets worse for Russia. There is a reason why Ukraine is targeting Russia's aircraft manufacturing and repair facilities beyond simply slowing Russian forces down on the front. Several incidents that occurred up to the end of 2025 demonstrate that Russia's military aviation sector is actively degrading. The December 2025 crash of an AN-22 aircraft over Russia's Ivanovo Oblast was accompanied by the loss of pilots in an unnamed fighter jet, likely an Su-34 or Su-35, at around the same time, the New Voice of Ukraine reports. 2 of Russia's pilots died after an ejector seat malfunction while their fighter was safely inside a hangar. Incidents like these tell us that Russia is struggling to maintain its military aircraft, likely as a result of losing the ability to purchase key components due to sanctions. That casts a new light on Ukraine's pair of strikes on March 16th and 17th. It's not just the plants themselves that are burning. The odds are that crucial components designed to keep Russia's planes in the air have gone up in smoke too. Pavlo Narozhny, who is the founder of the non-profit Reactive Mail, explains Russia's problem to the New Voice of Ukraine, stating, "Russian aviation is degrading, that's no secret. Even Russian propagandists have inadvertently admitted this. There was a moment when a Russian aircraft was destroyed by a drone, and a Russian propagandist said, 'It wasn't an important plane anyway, we were going to scrap it for parts.' Planes being scrapped for parts means that Russia doesn't have the parts that it needs available. It's cannibalizing its own aircraft. Ukraine knows this and is taking advantage. It may have hit something irreplaceable for Russia in Donetsk, but it did the same in Ulyanovsk and Staraya. Aircraft components are like gold dust in Russia right now, so losing them is yet another blow against a Russian air force that is crumbling under the weight of sanctions. So Rubicon has been torn apart and Russia's military aviation has taken a massive blow. But Ukraine hasn't stopped there. Time and time again, its new combination of middle and long-range strikes is devastating Russia. As all of this has been happening, Ukraine has unleashed its biggest drone raid, and chief among the targets, Moscow. Find out more about that raid in our video, and if you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe to see more analysis of Ukraine's drone strikes by The Military Show. And thank you as always for watching.